Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome to the bonus show. There has been a suicide bombing in Russia at a train station, has killed at least 15 people in southern Russia. And I mean, in the shadow of the Olympics coming up, I guess this is scaring a lot of people. And it's believed that, no one has claimed responsibility yet. It's believed that this has to do with one of the Chechen rebel groups. And one of the leaders, I guess a few months ago, called for attacks against civilian targets in Russia and, including the games, the Olympics. So did you hear about this? Well, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't... Is your sense, I guess, first, I'm curious if you think that this is directly timed to start stoking fears around the security of the Olympic Games?
I assume so. Yeah, that would be my guess.
Yeah. Ultimately, we've seen historically the Olympics be a site for terror or violence a few times. And therefore, we can't rule out that there would be elements that would want to see that happen. Without getting into kind of a conversation about the specific security systems that will be in place at those particular Olympics, I think it's just interesting to think about who it is that sees the Olympics as an opportunity to kind of make political points or whatever the case may be. These tensions in Russia have existed for a really long time. So it doesn't seem that if there is unrest around the Olympics, it would be because of the Olympics. It would just kind of be a convenient worldwide stage in which to express the pre-existing conflicts and tensions that are there.
Exactly. So we'll see what will happen. We know that with the last Olympics, the security was completely crazy. I mean, weren't there like mounted like surface-to-air missile turrets and things like that?
I think so. And also, you literally couldn't bring anything in. Like, you weren't allowed to bring water in with you, if I recall correctly, to the events. Yeah, I have to tell you, I'm actually looking more forward, I think, to the World Cup this summer than I am to the Olympics.
Yeah, well, we will see. I'm certainly looking forward to the World Cup, but there is another instance in which it's a world stage and, it's a prime candidate for the attacks of crazy people. So we'll see what will happen there. Let's talk about this plus-size Barbie. Plussizemodeling.com is basically suggesting that Mattel creates a plus-size Barbie. And some people are saying that, well, maybe just a Barbie with a slightly more realistic Barbie would suffice. They want a very heavy and I guess unhealthy Barbie. Of course, the current Barbie, in my opinion, as just a glamorized doll, wouldn't necessarily shouldn't cause any mentally healthy person to, end up with some type of eating disorder. But of course, there are people making that argument.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's less the argument. To me, that argument doesn't really make sense. People will see a Barbie doll, kids will see a Barbie doll, and they'll develop an eating disorder. I think more realistic is that the body of Barbie represents an unrealistic body image that nobody could realistically attain. I think there was a study done about could Barbie physically walk if her proportions were real and like a full-size human, and it was like not even clear that it would be a functioning human being. So I actually do understand that. And I understand also the objectification of women, etc. My concern about this is this the best way to fight that issue, right? In other words, is the best investment of time and money into having a doll which only... Certainly there are boys who play with dolls, but it's mostly girls who play with dolls, and it is only some girls who have Barbies, right? You're only reaching a percentage of the population during a percentage of their lives when they're playing with dolls. There might be something that is that might yield a much better return in terms of addressing the objectification of women and unrealistic body expectations that society places on women. than changing the proportions of Barbie. That's my concern.
Yeah. And I mean, where do you draw the line? Does it make sense to have a Barbie that's obviously overweight? And I mean, is it okay to tell young girls that it's okay to be at an unhealthy weight?
That's
Where
the
do
other
you,
thing, which is if you
yeah,
take it too far, you basically what people should be advocating for is not so much Barbies that represent all body types that are on this planet, but more a Barbie that represents what would be a realistic but healthy body. And then even on that, you would have disagreement. However, I don't think there's any disagreement that the existing Barbie is not a realistic body.
right. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
So there it is. Where do you draw the line with Barbies? Does it make sense to have a plus size Barbie? Does anyone who's listening to this story care about Barbie at all? I don't know, but I think it's kind of interesting.
I think it is very,
There are people pushing for a Barbie who is clearly not at a healthy weight, as opposed to a Barbie that is just not realistic in any human way.
And also not at a healthy weight on the underside.
Oh, right. But I mean, like you said, I mean, a human being might not even be able to physically exist if they looked like a Barbie.
Yeah.
Here's a great story about Toby Keith's new restaurant.
Yeah, I read this.
And there was a sign out front that said "No guns permitted."
Now, Toby Keith, for people who don't know, is a country singer, and I think that that's relevant to the story.
Right, country singer. Very important detail there. Some people said, here's one: that sign on the door means that I will never try your restaurant. It's a cultural thing among we Americans. It is the fact that you seek to restrict a constitutional right that bothers the public. This is what will cost you. Another person said, I'm ashamed to say I was ever a fan of yours, Toby. You truly are a hypocrite. Now, this restaurant is owned by Capri Restaurant Group, which they're in all sorts of cities, lots of different restaurants. I think there's a chance that this could just be a policy among them all around. I think there's a chance that Toby Keith might have nothing to do with the management or running of this restaurant, other than just perhaps having his name on it.
Totally. This may have nothing to do. He may just be paid some kind of licensing amount just to put his name on the place. It's managed, obviously, by someone else. But the funniest thing is that if you like the food, do you really need to have your gun with you in there? Like, is it so imperative to your everyday life that you have your gun with you at all times that you would stop going to a restaurant that you otherwise like just because you can't be armed in the restaurant? It's just incredible. Is it a war zone? Is it like you're in Iraq and at any time, even when you're in the chow hall and you're eating, there might be an attack, right? So you have your gun with you at all times. Is that the situation that you're in? Do you really need your gun with you at all times? And it's just nobody's infringing on your right to own a firearm. The restaurant is just saying, when people are in here eating, we as a policy prefer they not be armed. That's it.
Some people like it. Certainly, I would feel more comfortable knowing that there were not a bunch of idiots in there with guns. And of course, a lot of people who carry around guns are of that mentality that at any time they could be in a firefight, because that's just, unfortunately, the mind state of a lot of people in this country, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And you're making a good point, which is whether or not I personally have a gun. Let's assume for a second that I have a gun, right? I would feel safer not having a gun in that restaurant and knowing that presumably others don't either. Of course, there's no metal detectors. It's like when Starbucks went from allowing guns to not allowing guns. You still can carry guns in there. And if somebody is a so-called bad guy with a gun, they could still have a gun in there. But to me, with the number of negligent discharges that are out there, the idea of everybody in there having a gun, and this is not the military or the police, right? This is just random people with guns. I don't feel particularly safe knowing tons of people in there have guns.
Yeah. And who, I mean, I think generally across the country, you're not allowed to drink while carrying. I think while having a gun on you, I think that's pretty much across the board, the rule. But as we know, that doesn't stop people. It's just a rule. People break that rule. and we see the effects of it all the time.
Hey, speaking of drinking, somebody was asking me, Lewis, now that you're working at a bar down in Austin where you do check IDs, have you had fake IDs presented yet?
To my knowledge, I have not had a fake ID shown to me, but I have had underage people show me IDs that don't even have their birthday, and in an attempt to get in. I've had some people just hand me their ID who are underage, and it says they're underage, hoping that I won't notice. And I've had people hand me other people's IDs.
Okay. So the most interesting one there, I think, is the other people's IDs, because there is some element of, can you prove that you're this person? So were there any interesting ones with that?
I had a girl come up with a group, and I don't know if they concocted this whole story, but they played out the whole story in front of me, right? How she left her ID at the last bar, and while her friends come in, and then a couple of them go back outside, and they're like, oh, she's like, oh, my ID was in my friend's wallet. I'm like, thinking, oh, how convenient. So she hands me an ID. I look at it, and obviously I'm sketched out by this whole story they played out, right? And so she hands me an ID. The picture doesn't really look like her. I say, when's your birthday? And she kind of sighs. She didn't read the birthday on the card. She doesn't know. She spits out a random date, and I say, you're not coming in. But had they not played out that whole story in an attempt to make this believable scenario,
and just shown you the other person's ID,
and just show me the other ID, there's a chance it might have worked.
Right.
I also had another girl walk up and hand me an ID of someone that looks nothing like her. And I do the same thing. I say, when's your birthday? And she, clearly is upset and says the wrong birthday. And I say, no, go away. She comes back literally 30 seconds later and hands me a different ID from a different person who's not her.
Right.
Right. And I take it, I look at it, and I'm like, well, are you serious? What are you doing? And she's like, please. And I say, no, don't come back. And then she's like, fine, sorry, and leaves. She was nice about it, at least. But
yeah.
I think that those are the only two instances. Yeah.
So you're getting pretty good at just spotting situations that aren't quite right, I'm guessing, at this point.
Yeah, oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I card people, anyone who I think is like under 40 generally is the rule who you card. And so obviously there's, extra scrutiny with people who just look really young. I'm pretty confident that I have not let in more than, I don't know, hopefully more than one or two underage people, and out of the hundreds, or maybe even thousands I've been IDing.
Yeah, I'm sure it's thousands, no question about it.
Maybe even hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, there's any number of people that you've ID'd.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for this year. This is the last bonus show of the year. Special thanks to all of our members. We have some exciting announcements for you. We're going to do kind of like a pre-announcement type thing about 2014 on the first show of 2014. We'll go into a little more detail on the bonus show just to give you guys an idea of what's going on. It's been an excellent, excellent year. Have a good New Year, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, whatever it is that you're doing, wherever you may be. And then we will be back with you on January 2nd. We're taking January 1st off. There will be a best of show on the non-member side. Just remember that. We're not disappearing or anything. Just no show January 1st. We'll be back January 2nd.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.